The massive Droo battlecruisers emerged from hyperspace, casting long shadows across the solar system's peaceful perimeter. Captain Hyun Park watched through the reinforced observation window, his dark eyes reflecting the cold metallic silhouettes of the alien vessels. Each ship looked like a twisted metallic predator, sleek and menacing against the backdrop of distant stars. The communication systems crackled with tension. Diplomatic channels buzzed with urgent transmissions, but the Droo made no attempt to communicate. Their approach was deliberate, calculated, and carried an unmistakable sense of superiority. Admiral Seok Kim stood beside Hyun, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "They believe we are insignificant," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else in the command center. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Hidden beneath the calm exterior of Earth's defense networks were complex systems of quantum computing, advanced weaponry, and strategic algorithms designed to counter potential alien threats. But no one could have predicted the exact moment of first contact would feel so anticlimactic. The first Droo communication arrived, not as a diplomatic greeting, but as a cold, mechanical demand. Human territories will be evacuated. Resistance is inappropriate. Compliance is mandatory. Hyun's team exchanged glances. The translation was perfect, yet something felt fundamentally wrong about the message. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an order. Satellite networks tracked the Droo ship's movements. They weren't just approaching Earth, they were systematically mapping human-controlled space, identifying strategic points with ruthless efficiency. Small colonies on Mars, research stations in the asteroid belt, and orbital platforms were now under direct scanner surveillance. "They think we're primitive," Hyun said quietly, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Each movement triggered complex defense protocols that remained invisible to the alien scanners. The Droo vessels began positioning themselves, creating a perfect geometric formation that suggested military precision. Their technological superiority was evident. Energy signatures suggested weapons capabilities far beyond current human understanding. In the background, Earth's leadership convened emergency meetings. Military strategists, diplomatic corps, and scientific researchers worked in synchronized chaos. They knew this moment would define humanity's future. Hyun noticed something unusual in the Droo ship's energy readings. Tiny fluctuations that most would ignore were sending him a different message. These weren't just military vessels. They were reconnaissance units, probing, testing, evaluating. "They're studying us," he whispered to his second-in-command, Jay. Jay nodded, understanding the deeper implication. The Droo weren't here to immediately destroy. They wanted to understand, to categorize, to determine humanity's exact potential, and threat-level orbital defense systems powered up silently. Quantum-encrypted communication networks spread like invisible spiderwebs, connecting every human settlement from Mercury's research bases to the distant Titan colonies. No one watching would realize the complex dance of information happening beneath the surface. The Droo ships moved closer. Their metallic hulls reflected starlight, creating an almost beautiful, terrifying display of technological might. Each vessel was larger than entire human cities, a testament to the alien civilization's engineering capabilities. "Prepare defensive protocols," Admiral Kim commanded, his voice steady and calm. Hyun understood what remained unspoken. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing a message, a demonstration that would make the Droo reconsider their assumption of human weakness. As the alien vessels completed their initial positioning, something fundamental was about to change. This wasn't just a first contact scenario. This was a moment that would redefine humanity's place in the universe. The command center hummed with restrained energy. Screens flickered with data, satellite feeds, and complex mathematical projections. Humans had always been adaptable, innovative, and surprisingly resilient. Woojin's fingers moved rapidly across holographic interfaces, creating complex networks of potential scenarios. The research facility deep beneath the Andes Mountains hummed with quiet intensity. Outside, the world continued its normal routine. unaware of the strategic preparations happening underground. Strategic mapping wasn't just about military tactics anymore. It was about understanding the Droo's psychological approach, their technological limitations, and potential weak points. Each algorithm Wu developed contained multiple layers of potential responses, like a three-dimensional chess game played across galactic distances. Yoon Lee watched the data streams, her sharp eyes catching minute details that others might miss. Military coordination had evolved beyond traditional warfare. This was about intelligent resistance, not just direct confrontation. Hidden quantum communication networks began spreading across human settlements. These weren't ordinary communication systems. They were adaptive, self-healing networks that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously if detected or attacked. Small relay stations embedded in seemingly ordinary infrastructure, cell towers, satellite communication points, even deep-sea communication cables, became potential defensive nodes. Earth's governments, which had long struggled with internal conflicts, suddenly found unprecedented unity. The Droo threat became the catalyst for global cooperation. Resources were pooled, scientific research accelerated, and military strategies synchronized across continents. Advanced research facilities around the world started working on unconventional defense mechanisms. In a laboratory in Tokyo, scientists developed nanite technologies that could potentially disrupt alien communication systems. Another team in São Paulo worked on energy manipulation techniques that could create temporary spatial distortions. Wu's team discovered something fascinating about the initial Droo transmissions. Hidden within their communication protocols were subtle patterns that suggested a hierarchical, almost rigid decision-making process. This wasn't just a technological insight. It was a potential strategic weakness. They think linearly, Wu explained to Yoon during a strategy meeting. Their technological superiority might actually be their greatest limitation. Satellite networks began implementing complex camouflage techniques. Instead of trying to hide, they would present multiple, false signatures, creating confusion in alien scanning systems. It was like creating thousands of mirror reflections, making it impossible to determine the real target. Military training underwent radical transformation. Soldiers were no longer just physical fighters. They became adaptive strategists, trained in quantum communication, psychological warfare, and rapid technological adaptation. Traditional weapons gave way to intelligent systems that could think and respond independently. Space colonies received special preparation protocols. Each settlement was now designed with multiple escape and reconfiguration options. Underground facilities, mobile habitat modules, and advanced cloaking technologies turned human settlements into potential moving targets. Artificial intelligence systems worked alongside human strategists, creating millions of potential scenario simulations. Every second. These weren't just predictive models. They were learning systems that could adapt in real time. Yoon discovered something interesting in the data streams. The Droo's technological approach suggested they viewed conflict as a mathematical problem. They expected logical, predictable responses. Human unpredictability could become their greatest weapon. "We're not going to fight them on their terms," Yoon told her team. "We'll create our own rules of engagement." Research into quantum entanglement accelerated. If communication could be instantaneous and undetectable, traditional ideas of warfare would become obsolete. Human scientists were turning theoretical physics into potential defensive strategies. Global communication networks started embedding complex encryption methods that went beyond traditional cybersecurity. These were living, breathing communication systems that could change their fundamental structure, millisecond by millisecond. Wu's team worked around the clock, fueled by a combination of scientific curiosity and survival instinct. They weren't just preparing for a potential conflict. They were reimagining humanity's approach to technological interaction. As the Droo ships continued their systematic survey of human territories, they remained unaware of the complex preparations happening beneath the surface. Humanity was transforming, adapting, becoming something entirely unexpected. The transmission room was cold and silent. Sung Min stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the complex communication array. Outside, the reinforced windows. Earth looked peaceful, unaware of the impending message that would change everything. Communication specialist Yuna Kim adjusted several quantum encryption modules. Each device represented years of advanced research, capable of transmitting information in ways the Droo could never comprehend. "Ready," she whispered. The message was elegantly simple. No complex language, no elaborate explanations, just a direct, calculated communication that would send chills through the Droo Empire's communication networks. "Understand this. Your aggression triggers our response. Prepare." Those 8 words carried multiple layers of meaning. They weren't a threat. They were a promise. Quantum communication channels activated simultaneously across multiple star systems. Human settlements that appeared disconnected suddenly synchronized, creating a web of information that pulsed with potential energy. Yuna's fingers moved with precision, embedding microscopic data packets within the primary transmission. To any external scanner, it would appear like a simple, almost mundane communication. But underneath, complex algorithms were being distributed across galactic networks. The Droo communication centers would receive the message. They would analyze it, dissect it, try to understand its deeper meaning, but they would find nothing concrete, just a warning that suggested something far more significant was coming. Sung Min understood the psychological warfare behind this transmission. It wasn't about revealing capabilities. It was about creating uncertainty, about making the Droo question every assumption they held about humanity. Research stations hidden in remote solar system locations began their synchronized response. Each station released carefully crafted signal bursts that seemed random but were mathematically precise. They were planting seeds of confusion in alien detection systems. "They will not understand," Sung Min said quietly. And that's exactly the point. The transmission lasted less than 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds, humanity had just changed the entire dynamic of potential conflict. Quantum entanglement modules allowed the message to exist in multiple states simultaneously. By the time Droo analysts would attempt to trace its origin, the transmission would have already transformed, disappeared, reappeared in different computational dimensions. Yuna noticed subtle energy fluctuations in the communication array. The message had been sent, but its implications were still reverberating through complex technological networks. "They will hesitate," she told Sung Min. "Uncertainty is our first weapon." Military strategists around the world watched communication feeds. No external signs of activity would be visible. But beneath the surface, humanity was preparing something unprecedented. The warning wasn't just a message. It was a demonstration of potential. It suggested that humanity possessed technological capabilities far beyond traditional understanding. More importantly, it communicated something the Droo had not expected: complete psychological control of the situation. Sung Min allowed himself a slight smile. The Droo would spend weeks, perhaps months, analyzing this single transmission. They would deploy countless computational resources, try to decode hidden meanings, attempt to understand the complex layers beneath those 8 simple words, and they would find nothing. Research facilities across Earth began their next phase of preparation. The warning was just the first step in a much larger, more complex strategy. The quantum communication array slowly powered down. Yuna's hands moved across final verification protocols. Everything was perfect, untraceable, mysterious. "Transmission complete," she said. Sung Min nodded. The first move had been made. Now they would wait. The Droo would receive the message. They would analyze it. They would wonder. And humanity would continue preparing. The first signs were subtle. Dae-Sung noticed tiny anomalies in the global tracking systems. Space stations went silent. Research colonies stopped transmitting. Not with explosions or dramatic destruction, but with a quiet, almost peaceful disappearance. Ji-hoon watched the holographic displays, his fingers tracing the vanishing human settlements. Mars colonies, gone. Lunar research stations, vanished. Titan outposts, completely disappeared. No debris, no signals. Nothing. The Droo Empire's massive intelligence networks began to crash. Their most advanced scanning technologies couldn't comprehend what was happening. Entire human territories were simply erasing themselves from existence. Communication centers across alien territories buzzed with confusion. Where were the humans? What technological marvel could make entire populations and settlements vanish without a trace? Orbital satellites that once tracked human activities now showed empty coordinates. Space itself seemed to have swallowed human presence. No radiation signatures, no electromagnetic residue, complete and total absence. Dae-sung understood something profound was happening. This wasn't destruction, this was something far more complex. Humanity was performing a collective transformation that defied traditional understanding of space, time, and existence. Research teams deployed increasingly sophisticated scanning technologies. Each attempt revealed nothing. It was as if humans had never existed in those locations. No archaeological traces, no technological remnants, complete erasure. The Droo leadership began to panic. Their initial arrogance transformed into genuine confusion. How could an entire species simply disappear? Their computational models broke down. Their predictive algorithms collapsed. Ji-hoon watched the global networks. Beneath the apparent emptiness, he knew complex systems were moving. Humanity wasn't gone. They were changing, transforming. Quantum communication networks continued their silent dance. Invisible, undetectable, waiting. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. The emptiness where human territories once existed now felt pregnant with potential. Something was happening, something unprecedented. Droo military commanders demanded explanations. Their most advanced intelligence systems provided nothing. No data, no traces. Complete mystery. Research facilities that once tracked human activities now showed blank screens. Computational systems tried repeatedly to retrieve information, but found only empty coordinates. Dae-sung understood this was more than a technological event. This was a philosophical statement. Humanity was demonstrating something fundamental about existence, adaptation, and potential. The vanishing wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Alien communication centers received no distress signals, no final messages, no explanations, just silence. Perfect, complete silence. Ji-hoon allowed himself a slight smile. The preparation was complete. The first phase of humanity's transformation had begun. Tracking systems continued their futile scans. Space seemed to have forgotten human presence. Entire star systems where human settlements once existed now showed nothing but empty coordinates. The Droo Empire's most advanced computational systems began to overheat, trying to understand the impossible, trying to track the untrackable. Humanity wasn't destroyed. Humanity was evolving. Dae-sung watched the final disappearance of the last known human settlement. A research station near Jupiter's moon Europa simply faded from existence. One moment present, the next, gone. No explosions, no drama, just pure calculated vanishing. The universe held its collective breath. Something fundamental had changed, and no one, not humans, not the Droo, not any existing technological system, completely understood what was happening. Silence reigned. The transmission arrived without warning. Kang Hee's hands trembled as the first data packets began streaming through quantum communication channels. Imperial researchers gathered around, their anticipation thick in the sterile research environment. Min Seo adjusted complex decryption modules, her fingers moving with mathematical precision. The data stream wasn't just information. It was a message that would redefine everything the Droo understood about existence. At first, the transmission appeared nonsensical. Fragments of mathematical equations, quantum probabilistic models, and what seemed like impossible computational structures danced across the screens. Then slowly a pattern emerged. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. They had transcended. The message revealed a fundamental truth that shattered everything the Droo believed about technological evolution. Humans had discovered a way to transform, their entire species' consciousness into a state of pure informational existence. They weren't limited by physical bodies anymore. Each data packet contained layers of complexity that would take decades to fully understand. It was a deliberate message, showing the Droo exactly how limited their understanding of existence truly was. Quantum consciousness, dimensional transformation, pure informational being. These weren't just scientific concepts, they were the new state of human existence. The Droo Empire's top researchers began to realize something terrifying. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They had become something entirely beyond traditional understanding of life, technology, and consciousness. Minseo watched as the transmission continued. It wasn't just a message. It was a comprehensive blueprint of human transformation. Every scientific breakthrough, every hidden research project, every theoretical concept humanity had ever developed was now laid bare. But it wasn't a vulnerability. It was a challenge. The final part of the transmission contained a simple statement. Not in words, but in a complex mathematical language that spoke directly to computational understanding. This is what evolution truly means. Kang He understood the deeper meaning. Humanity had used the Droo's potential attack as a catalyst for their ultimate transformation. What appeared to be a defensive strategy was actually a planned evolutionary leap. Research facilities across the Droo Empire began to crash. The transmission contained computational structures so advanced that they began to rewrite existing technological systems simply by being observed. It was a message, a warning, a demonstration. Humanity wasn't gone. They had become something more. The quantum transmission continued to unfold. Each layer revealed more complex understanding. Humans had discovered how to convert their entire collective consciousness into a state of pure informational potential. No physical limitations, no biological constraints. Pure thought, pure potential. Minseo realized they were looking at the ultimate form of technological evolution. Humanity had essentially turned themselves into a living, thinking, evolving computational system that existed beyond traditional dimensional constraints. The Droo leadership would spend generations trying to understand this single transmission. It wasn't just information. It was a complete reimagining of what life, technology, and consciousness could be. Kang He watched the final sequences of the transmission, a complex mathematical representation that was simultaneously a goodbye, a warning, and an invitation. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer a species limited by physical existence. They had become something else entirely, something beyond understanding, something impossible, something new. The transmission ended, but its implications would reshape everything the Droo, and potentially any other civilization, understood about existence, evolution, and potential. Humanity hadn't disappeared.